Hi, my name's Matt Follas. I won MasterChef back in 2009 now, so a while ago. Since then, I've been running restaurants, working as a chef. This is my latest venture. We've moved from Dorchester to Sherborne, and this slightly dishevelled state is my new restaurant, Bramble Restaurant, which will be opening at the end of October. I do a lot of foraging courses, and one of the questions I'm always asked at this time of year is how do I make Sloe gin? So I'm going to do a brief demo on how to make Sloe gin, and I've also got a twist on that, a Sloe whiskey, which I add a little bit of star anise to, and that works really, really well with Sloes as well. So we start by adding our Sloes, which are, I'm not sure the technical term, they're like a variety of plum. If you can't get Sloes, and most of what I'm doing you can do with plums, especially if you can find wild plums. Damsons are great, sort of old Victoria plums. If you go to an old railway line, if you go and find an old railway line, it's the best place to find wild plums. Because in the good old days, people would go out for a day on the train, they'd eat the plums, they'd throw the seeds out the window, so you'll find plum trees, apple trees. And in the spring, they used to eat strawberries, and they would deposit strawberries, complete with fertiliser on the track, and so you get wild strawberries growing along old railway lines as well. Best place to go foraging. So what I've got is some Sloes that I've picked. I've also got a few rose hips. Rose hips are fantastic as an infusion. You can also make a syrup with them, but I always add a few rose hips to my Sloe gin, and what it does is it lightens it, adds a bit of brightness to it, and that brightness means that I can use less sugar. Same when I'm making jams. If I'm making a berry jam, I always add a little bit of rose extract to it. So if I'm making a classic jam, 500 grams of mixed berries, I will add, traditionally you'd add 500 grams of sugar. I'll add about 350 grams of sugar and just a little bit of rose extract, and you get a lovely bright jam that tastes of the berries much more than tasting of sort of cooked sugar like a lot of jams do. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, fill the jars up about half full with the Sloes, add a couple of rose hips to it, don't need very many rose hips, and then we're going to add some sugar. And then we're going to add the booze to it. So to the gin one, I'm adding vodka, because as everybody knows, gin is flavoured vodka. So we'll add vodka, we'll add some juniper berries, juniper being the gin flavouring, and we'll also add a little bit of lemon. A classic gin is juniper berries, citrus, and a little bit of spice. And in this case, the Sloes will overrule any spice we might add to it. So we're not going to add the spice, but we'll add some nice fresh lemon to it, and we'll add the Sloes, we'll add the juniper, and a reasonable amount of sugar. For me, we're using about, I think these are about 700 grams, so I'll add about 250 grams of light brown sugar to it. The other version I'm going to make is a whiskey version, and whiskey takes a little bit of spice with it, so we're going to add a little bit of star anise to it, and that will just season it really nicely. About the same amount of sugar, so we'll end up at the end of it with a nice liqueur flavour, which is what we're looking for from a Sloe gin or a Sloe whiskey. Okay, right, let's make some Sloe gin. So to make Sloe gin, obviously we need Sloes. I've got a nice bowl here that I picked a couple of days ago. Sloes, to pick them, if you look at sort of a lot of guides online and folklore will tell you to pick them after the first frost. The first frost in Somerset and Dorset is long after the birds have eaten all the Sloes. So pick them when they just start to pucker. And by pucker I mean when they start to look a bit like raisins. So the skin just starts to come in. As soon as some of them start doing that, good time to go and pick them. That's now. So that's first, second week of October is the perfect time. If we've had a really hot summer, you might be picking them mid-September, and obviously might be a little bit later in October if it's been a bit of a miserable one. So this year is about normal. So pick a whole bunch. You need a reasonable amount of them and put them in the freezer. So don't have too much. I've got a few leaves and things in here which won't do any harm, but pick them, put them in the freezer for at least 24 hours. And what the freezer will do is it'll do what the first frost has done, and it sweetens them, so the proteins in them change slightly, so they become a little bit sweeter, and the skin becomes soft and will often split. So again, you'll see a lot of guides online where they tell you to prick them with a pin or a needle. You don't need to do that. You can see a lot of these are just starting to break up, and as they defrost in the gin mix, they'll break up a little bit more. We're infusing for a long period of time. to infuse something like rose petals takes 1 or 2 days. We're infusing a stone fruit here. So a stone fruit you want to infuse for a good few weeks typically. Something like sloes, where we're trying to get all the flavour out of the skin, then we're looking for at least a couple of months. So now's a really good time to get your sloe gin ready for Christmas or even January, February. It's getting really, really good by then. So I'm going to put some into the jar. So I said to add a few rose hips, so I'm going to find myself a couple of rose hips. I've got a few leaves in there that I will pick out as I go, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. That's about enough. Give it a shake, get out any bits of leaf and stuff. If you're going to drink it, you can drink it straight as it is, or what I would recommend you do is you decant it and drink the liquid, drink the sloe gin. The berries are fantastic, and you can either use them in something like clafouti. So look up a clafouti, which is like an almond Yorkshire pudding, so a sweet Yorkshire pudding, and you just dot them in it. They're delicious in that. Eat them in that. Don't eat the pips. The pips have got quite high levels of cyanide, so don't chew the pips, but you can spit them out, or you can safely swallow them. So don't be too paranoid about them, but never ever grind them up and use them to try and speed up the process. The other thing to do with them, a really good recommendation I've had from a couple of people, is to use them in something like a port, so a sweet port. Don't use the expensive stuff, get the stuff from the bottom shelf, and you'll get a second infusion in that port, which is absolutely delicious. So you get a lovely sort of sloe port, which is sweetened by the sloe. So I'm just going to put sort of 1 wedge of lemon in there. I'm going to add some juniper berries as well, because as we know, or not know, gin is just juniper flavoured vodka. So we're using about half a teaspoon of juniper berries. That will be enough for this size. We're going to add some sugar. So for a jar of this size, probably almost about the same in terms of how it looks in the jar. So we're almost filling the jar up with the sugar. So quite a lot of sugar, but you'll need that to balance the really tart flavour of those sloes. And then we fill it up with vodka. So simple to do. Put the lid on. And there we have our sloe gin. Put that on the top shelf and leave it till Christmas. Have a taste of it at Christmas. Absolutely delicious stuff. You can turn it a few times just until that sugar is fully dissolved. But just leave it to settle. It will go a dark brown. Absolutely delicious. The other one that I was going to make was pretty much the same thing, but we're going to use a whiskey. With the whiskey, we're looking for a much richer flavour, so I'm not going to add the rose hips to it. But we want about the same amount of sloes. So again, nearly half of sloes. We still want the sugar. So it looks like a lot of sugar, I know, but you do need it. We're not making health drinks here, are we? And then your star anise, I would only add sort of 2 or 3 segments of the star anise. Too much of that and it's just going to taste really licoricey. So you just want a little bit of that just to round the flavours out nicely. And then the whiskey, I'm just using a blended whiskey. Again, bottom shelf of the supermarket is perfectly good enough for doing this. And with the vodka that we used, again, that was a supermarket owned brand. Vodka by definition is a flavourless liquid. So you can spend an awful lot for an expensive vodka. To be honest, most supermarket vodkas are very good quality. They've all been triple distilled. Some of them, the one I use, Tesco's own, it's won international awards. It's a very good vodka. The whiskey, We're not looking for a quality whiskey because all the nuances of a single malt or an expensive whiskey are just going to be overrun by the flavours of the Sloe. So again, give that a little shake, get the sugar starting to dissolve. It will dissolve over the next week or two, and we'll end up with a lovely whiskey, or Sloe whiskey liqueur at the end of it. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions of what you're picking particularly, like anything to do with foraging, always be 100% sure of the berries that you're picking. If you don't know your rose hips or your sloes, then get somebody who does to come with you, and make sure that you pick the right things. Apart from that, it's really simple. Enjoy it, leave it for a good few months, and cheers.